Good day, everyone. I hope you are well. I wish I could be in Palm Springs, eating Shakey's pizza, drinking Hangar 24 beer, and pestering the Esri developer teams. My presentation is pretty quick and dirty due to a very tight deadline for submission. I'll be covering a proof of concept project. Currently, we use ArcMap, ArcObjects, and geometric network tracing to automate our standard map products. Last year, I started exploring the feasibility of generating PDF maps from a web application, which in the past has tended to yield limited, if not downright crappy results. With the advent of ArcPy.mp, however, it is finally possible to generate quality map products using a geoprocessing service. I'll be breezing through many of these slides, but at the end I will present a link where you can download both the slides and the sample code. My first successful example was documented in this GeoNet blog post. It worked with SDE connections to query and manipulate layers, and did not involve any network. For this presentation, I used a pilot implementation of a utility network to generate a pressure system certification map. While this new approach proved to be a success, I ran into some issues yet to be resolved, and there are some other experiments I would like to try out. Therefore, this presentation is not as fleshed out as I would like, and I do plan eventually to post a follow-up blog on this project. In creating the example for this presentation, I used ArcGIS Pro 252 and 271. While the system cert map works in both versions, in real life each version has a different set of bugs. Therefore, I must use a particular version depending on the desired workflow. However, that is outside the scope of this presentation. The same is also true of Enterprise 10.8 versus 10.8.1, and I will be getting into that later. Right now, I would like to demonstrate the system cert map application as it currently stands. The rest of the presentation will cover how I accomplished it. Here's the ArcGIS Pro project that I authored for the system cert map. You can see vals feeding the system, stations feeding the system, stations fed from the system itself, and systems fed from the system, as well as other mains and parcels. The layout has a text element that has the name, main title. There is also a subtitle element. The legend is configured to appear in a certain way in order. And there is also a date element, which could, as an alternative, be populated using dynamic text, but I do not do that for this example. Here's what I have over in Portal. There's the web tool itself, the web map, the custom Web AppBuilder widget, and the final web mapping application. So here we have it. There's the custom widget. And we're going to start off with a plot of the Cottonwood 1 system. As you can see, informational messages are being displayed on the widget as the Python tool progresses. This test box, this 10.8 test box, is sitting in Flagstaff, whereas everything else is down in Tucson, so there's a bit of a delay there, especially since there's a lot of parcels being rendered on these maps. So we'll just give it a little time here. And here we go. So you can see that the title has been populated. And I'm going to zoom into the legend a bit further here, hopefully, and oops. Okay. And you can see how the legend has been populated, the systems fed, stations, and so forth. So now we're going to try Flagstaff 2A, a smaller system, and going to give it a subtitle here. And also we will check show other mains. And this will not take as long to generate. And here we go. And you can see that the other mains layer is now visible. And because this system does not feed other systems, those layers of stations fed and systems fed are not visible. Okay. So what advantages does a utility network bring to the table? The generation of subnetworks is a big plus in producing map products because basically all of the network analysis has been done already and the results are ready to use. When you have clean subnetworks, not only do you have trace result lines that you can query and symbolize, you also have some useful attributes populated directly on the features that participate in the network. For the system cert map, I used the MAOP attribute on the subnet lines and the subnetwork names on the assembly and device feature layers. When a utility network is published, feature and map services are automatically made available. The map service layers can be accessed by all different sorts of applications, and they may be queried, filtered, and symbolized as desired. For the system cert map, I used ArcGIS Pro to author the map and layout, and both JavaScript and Python APIs to query the map service layers. What makes ArcPy.mp useful is its ability to manipulate renderers, symbology, and layout elements. So far, the functionality has provided what I need for my map products. If it falls short, however, a really powerful feature is the ability to manipulate the cartographic information model directly. Note, however, that while modifying the sim works fine in Pro 252, I have discovered that it causes Pro 271 to crash. So let's start diving into the code. For the first step, I created a Python Toolbox. The first parameter specifies the location of the ArcGIS Pro project, which typically would be a shared folder accessible by the ArcGIS server process account. Supplying a blank value results in an empty result, which is useful for publishing the geoprocessing service. There are other ways to handle this, but my personal preference is to avoid any direct reference to data sources or folders in any code to be published as a GP service. The key to getting a usable URL to the output PDF is to define an output parameter of type DE file. When the PDF file is generated, ArcGIS Server will automatically move the local file from the Scratch folder to a virtual output folder. Unfortunately, Enterprise 10.8.1 has broken the PDF export process, depending on the portal configuration. It will not work in our own 10.8.1 portal, although it previously worked at 10.8. For this presentation, I worked around the issue by creating my own instance of 10.8. I will be opening up a case with Esri on this, and hopefully we'll find a resolution. If I do find a fix, I will post a follow-up on GeoNet. In the Python tool, I use ArcGIS API for Python to query map service layers. For this presentation, I shared the map service with everyone, so no user authentication is needed. However, I have verified that this code snippet will work to get the current credentials. Here I query the subnet lines to build a dictionary of system names and pressures. Here I query town border stations and regulator stations to collect information about the pressure subnets in which they participate. Here I use the previously gathered system pressures to determine if a station is feeding the pressure system or is being fed by it. Finally, I query the extent of the systems to be displayed on the map. I then expand the extent and convert it from Python API to ArcPy. Note that envelope as ArcPy has a bug which wipes out the spatial reference, hence this workaround. Now that I have gathered the information that I need for the map, I can open the APRX and modify the map in Layout. Note that I set the map extent via the map frame. In ArcMap, I used layer descriptions to identify them for the script. That's a little more complex in Pro because descriptions are in metadata. So instead, for this example, I use a substring of the layer name itself. For these two layers, note that I modify the visibility, the definition query, and the renderer. By default, text elements are updated, as you see here. Note that I could have used dynamic text for the date element. Note also that the center anchor points for text elements do not work properly in Pro 252 or Enterprise 10.8, hence this workaround. That bug is fixed at Pro 271. Unfortunately, this particular approach of listing elements and updating the element text does not work into Enterprise 10.8.1. It will cause a Java lang exception, could not service request. However, it works fine in 10.8. An alternative approach that works in 10.8.1 is to modify the sim. However, again, if I run this in Pro 271, it will crash. Now here's something that works in 10.8.1 as well as 10.8, but doesn't work in Pro. If a symbol is saved in a stylx file associated with a project, the symbol can be loaded in a web tool, but will not work when the tool is run in Pro. Finally, list missing values will not work in 10.8.1, but it does work in 10.8. So, to publish the tool, first I create an empty result. Pro 271 has a handy option to overwrite an existing web tool. Very nice. For this example, I set the message level to info. That way, when the Python tool generates messages, they will be displayed on the widget. Once published, the web tool may be run in a number of ways. I like using the REST interface directly for testing. At this point, it's fairly simple to use the JavaScript API to call the tool. For this presentation, I created a custom Web AppBuilder widget. As it initializes, The widget queries the subnet lines to gather pressure system names. Subnetwork names are parsed into towns and numbers to populate the select elements. System towns and numbers are sorted and select elements are populated. Changing the selected town populates the system numbers for that town. The Geoprocessor object is created when the widget initializes. When the Generate button is clicked, it sets up the parameters and submits the job. Again, while the job is running, informational messages are displayed. When the job is complete, the result parameter is retrieved. If successful, the PDF URL is retrieved and a window is opened to display it. So, what would I still like to do? Obviously, I would like to see the 10.8.1 issues resolved so that I do not need a separate 10.8 portal. I might set up the tool so that instead of returning a URL, it sends the PDF to a known location and sends an email notification. Finally, I would like at some point to start playing around with Experience Builder. However, a coworker who has been playing with it says that it's still pretty green and doesn't have a full palette of widgets. And that's it. Thank you for watching this presentation. You can use the link shown to download both this slide deck and the sample code. And hopefully next year we can meet again in Palm Springs. Goodbye.